One of the deepest wounds a person can experience is not simply betrayal. It is the moment when someone finally sees through the mask you spent a lifetime hiding behind. And this is why something strange happens. When a narcissist betrays a super empath, the empath eventually heals. But the narcissist often cannot recover from the loss, because what the narcissist loses in that moment is not just a relationship. They lose the one mirror that quietly reflected their hidden truth back to them. If this message resonates with you, pause for a moment. Subscribe now for deeper insights about healing and emotional freedom. Share this with someone who needs clarity after betrayal. And stay with me, because the next message may change how you see yourself forever. Betrayal, when it comes from a narcissistic person, does not simply damage a relationship. It exposes something far more fragile beneath the surface, the illusion that narcissists work tirelessly to maintain. From the outside, a narcissistic personality may appear confident, powerful, even untouchable. They often present themselves as people who are always right, always in control, always deserving of admiration. But this image is not their true self. It is a carefully constructed identity designed to protect them from something they fear deeply, the experience of feeling small, unworthy, or unseen. Many narcissistic traits grow out of early emotional wounds. Somewhere in the past, often during childhood, a person learned that their authentic emotions were not safe to express. Perhaps they were ignored when they needed comfort. Perhaps they were praised only when they performed well. Perhaps vulnerability was met with shame, criticism, or rejection. Over time, the mind learns to survive by creating a protective shell. Instead of showing the wounded self, the person creates a stronger, superior version of themselves, one that appears flawless and immune to hurt. This false self becomes the center of their identity. It demands admiration, control, and validation from others because it cannot sustain itself alone. The narcissistic personality relies heavily on what psychologists often call emotional supply, the attention, praise, and validation they receive from people around them. Without this supply, the illusion begins to weaken. The false self requires constant reinforcement to remain intact. When a narcissist enters a relationship with a deeply empathetic person, something complex begins to unfold. A super empath is someone with a heightened ability to understand and feel the emotional states of others. They tend to be patient, compassionate, and willing to see beyond surface behavior. They often notice pain where others see arrogance. They sense vulnerability where others see coldness. Because of this sensitivity, they frequently extend understanding and forgiveness even when they are hurt. For the narcissist, this can feel incredibly comforting at first. The empath provides attention, emotional energy, and a sense of being understood. But something deeper is happening beneath the surface of that connection. The empath's presence becomes a mirror, not a mirror that simply reflects admiration, but one that quietly reflects truth. The empath sees patterns, inconsistencies, emotional wounds, and unspoken pain. Even when they do not confront it directly, their awareness exists in the relationship. This creates a subtle tension within the narcissistic psyche. On one hand, the narcissist is drawn to the empath's compassion. On the other hand, they feel an unconscious threat. Being truly seen is frightening for someone who has spent a lifetime hiding behind a carefully constructed identity. The more the empath understands, the closer the narcissist comes to confronting parts of themselves they have worked very hard to avoid. Eventually, betrayal often enters the picture. The betrayal may take many forms: deception, emotional manipulation, infidelity, or sudden abandonment. But psychologically, betrayal serves a deeper function. It allows the narcissist to regain control of the emotional dynamic. When they feel too exposed, too vulnerable, or too dependent on someone who sees through them, they may sabotage the connection. By hurting the empath, they attempt to reassert their dominance and protect the false self from further exposure. Yet this act of betrayal creates a paradox. In trying to defend their illusion, the narcissist unintentionally damages the one relationship that was sustaining it in a unique way. The super empath, despite their patience, eventually recognizes the pattern. They begin to understand that compassion cannot heal someone who refuses self-awareness. At some point, the empath withdraws emotionally or physically from the relationship. This moment becomes deeply destabilizing for the narcissist. The empath was not simply another source of admiration. They were someone who had seen beyond the mask and still offered connection. Losing that person means losing the rare experience of being understood beneath the surface. At the same time, the betrayal itself makes it difficult for the empath to return. The narcissist is left facing a painful contradiction. The very act meant to protect their identity ends up exposing its fragility. Without the empath's presence, the illusion begins to feel hollow. The narcissist may attempt to replace the lost supply with new relationships, new attention, or new admiration. But the psychological rupture remains. Somewhere in their awareness, however faint, they recognize that someone once saw the truth behind the mask and walked away. That realization is profoundly unsettling. It threatens the stability of the false self because it suggests that the carefully constructed identity is not as convincing or permanent as they believed. Instead of confirming their superiority, the betrayal reveals something they have long avoided acknowledging. Beneath the illusion lies unresolved pain that cannot be outrun forever. A super empath possesses a rare emotional sensitivity that allows them to perceive what many others overlook. They do not simply hear words or observe behavior at the surface level. Instead, they sense emotional undercurrents, subtle contradictions, and hidden pain that lives beneath the masks people present to the world. This heightened awareness often develops from their own life experiences, moments where they learn to read emotional environments carefully in order to maintain connection or safety. Over time, this ability becomes almost instinctive. They walk into a room and feel the emotional climate immediately. They listen to someone speak and notice not only what is said, but what is left unsaid. When a super empath encounters a narcissistic personality, something psychologically complex begins to unfold. Most people respond to narcissistic behavior with frustration, distance, or avoidance. The arrogance, the need for admiration, the lack of emotional accountability, these traits often push others away. But the super empath reacts differently. Instead of focusing only on the outward display of superiority, they sense the deeper insecurity hiding underneath. They perceive a wounded part of the person that is trying desperately to avoid being exposed. Because of this perception, the empath often approaches the narcissist with patience and understanding. They may excuse certain behaviors, believing that compassion will help the person feel safe enough to reveal their authentic self. They offer reassurance, emotional presence, and the willingness to listen without judgment. To the empath, connection is built through understanding. If someone behaves in harmful ways, the empath often assumes there must be pain beneath it. This dynamic creates a powerful psychological mirror. The super empath, without realizing it, begins reflecting aspects of the narcissist's inner world back to them, not through confrontation or criticism, but simply through awareness. The empath notices patterns in the narcissist's behavior. They notice how admiration seems to calm them, how criticism triggers defensiveness, how vulnerability is quickly hidden behind control or superiority. Even when the empath speaks gently, their insights can reach uncomfortable truths. For the narcissist, this experience is deeply unsettling. The narcissistic personality structure depends on maintaining a carefully constructed image of strength and perfection. This image acts as a shield against feelings of shame or inadequacy that may have formed early in life. The narcissist learns to present a version of themselves that appears flawless and confident, hoping that if others believe the illusion, they might believe it too. But the empath's perception quietly disrupts this illusion. The empath sees the emotional cracks in the performance. They sense the anxiety behind the confidence and the loneliness behind the grandiosity. Even if the empath never openly points it out, their emotional attunement carries a silent message. The mask is not invisible. This is why the super empath becomes such a powerful mirror. A mirror does not judge. It simply reflects what is present. In the presence of a deeply perceptive person, the narcissist begins to feel that their inner reality is being noticed. This can create a strange combination of attraction and discomfort. Part of the narcissist feels drawn to the empath because being understood satisfies a deep emotional hunger. Very few people in their lives have looked beyond the surface and sensed the wounded parts they hide. At the same time, another part of the narcissist experiences this reflection as a threat. If someone can truly see them, the protective illusion they have built may collapse. The narcissist's greatest defense has always been control over how others perceive them. The empath's perception weakens that control. When someone sees through the mask, the narcissist can no longer rely entirely on their carefully crafted identity. This inner tension often leads to instability in the relationship. The narcissist may move back and forth between seeking closeness and pushing the empath away. At times, they may appear vulnerable, sharing fragments of their deeper emotions. At other times, they may become defensive, dismissive, or manipulative in order to regain emotional dominance. The empath, meanwhile, continues trying to nurture understanding and healing. But the mirror effect grows stronger over time. The empath's emotional awareness keeps reflecting patterns that the narcissist would rather avoid. It reveals inconsistencies between their actions and their self-image. It highlights moments where empathy is missing or responsibility is deflected. Even gentle observations from the empath can feel like exposure. For someone who has spent years avoiding self-confrontation, this exposure can become unbearable. The narcissist may feel as though the empath is threatening their entire identity, even if the empath's intentions are compassionate. The more clearly the empath perceives the narcissist's emotional wounds, the more intense the psychological pressure becomes. In this way, the super empath does not attack the narcissist's defenses, they simply illuminate them. Their presence becomes a mirror reflecting truths that were meant to stay hidden, and while mirrors have the potential to help someone grow and heal, they also demand a level of honesty that not everyone is ready to face. The emotional world of a narcissistic personality revolves around something that is rarely discussed openly, but is central to understanding their behavior: the need for emotional supply. Emotional supply refers to the attention, admiration, validation, and reassurance that the narcissist receives from others. It is not simply a desire to be liked or appreciated. For the narcissist, it functions almost like psychological oxygen. Without it, the fragile identity they have constructed begins to weaken. To understand why this happens, we must first recognize that the narcissistic self is often built upon a deep sense of insecurity that developed long before adulthood. Somewhere in their formative years, the person learned that their authentic emotions were not enough to guarantee love or acceptance. Instead of feeling valued for who they truly were, they may have been praised only for achievements, appearance, or performance. In other cases, they may have been criticized or ignored when they showed vulnerability. Over time, this environment can create a powerful belief: the real self is not worthy of love. In response to this painful belief, the psyche builds a protective structure. The person creates an idealized version of themselves, someone impressive, admirable, superior, or extraordinary. This version becomes the face they show the world. The narcissistic personality then spends much of its energy maintaining and protecting this identity. But because the identity is not rooted in genuine self-acceptance, it cannot sustain itself from within. It needs constant confirmation from outside sources. This is where emotional supply becomes essential. Compliments, admiration, loyalty, and attention from others help reinforce the illusion that the narcissist's constructed self is real. Every time someone praises them, agrees with them, or shows devotion, it temporarily quiets the deeper feelings of inadequacy that exist beneath the surface. The narcissist feels powerful and secure again, but only for a while. Because the insecurity has not truly been healed, the need for validation quickly returns. When a narcissist forms a relationship with a super empath, the supply they receive can feel especially powerful. Super empaths tend to offer more emotional energy than most people. They listen deeply, offer reassurance, and often show extraordinary patience when conflicts arise. They attempt to understand the narcissist's struggles and provide emotional support even when the relationship becomes difficult. At first, this dynamic may appear harmonious. The narcissist feels admired and emotionally supported, while the empath believes their compassion is helping the other person feel safe and valued. But beneath this apparent harmony lies a delicate imbalance. The empath gives far more emotional energy than they receive, while the narcissist becomes increasingly dependent on that energy to maintain their sense of self. Over time, the empath's role becomes central to the narcissist's psychological stability. The empath not only provides admiration, but also offers forgiveness after conflicts and reassurance after moments of insecurity. This steady flow of emotional supply strengthens the narcissist's illusion that they are deserving of constant understanding without needing to examine their own behavior. However, this arrangement cannot continue indefinitely. Super empaths, despite their patience, eventually begin to recognize patterns. They notice repeated cycles of manipulation, blame shifting, or emotional neglect. They may start to feel drained, confused, or unappreciated. Slowly, the empath's awareness grows. They realize that empathy alone cannot transform someone who refuses accountability. When this realization occurs, the empath begins to withdraw emotionally. This withdrawal does not always happen suddenly. Often it is gradual. The empath stops offering endless reassurance. They begin setting boundaries. They question behaviors that once went unchallenged. Eventually, some empaths choose to step away from the relationship entirely in order to protect their own well-being. For the narcissist, this moment can feel like the ground disappearing beneath their feet. The person who provided such a powerful and consistent source of emotional supply is no longer feeding the illusion. The validation they relied upon is suddenly gone. Without the empath's attention, the narcissist must confront a deep emptiness that had previously been hidden. This loss is psychologically destabilizing. The narcissist may attempt to regain control by reaching out again, offering apologies, or promising change. In other cases, they may react with anger or attempts to blame the empath for abandoning them. These reactions are often desperate efforts to restore the flow of emotional supply that once sustained their identity. Yet something fundamental has changed. Once the empath withdraws with clarity and firm boundaries, the narcissist loses access to the unique kind of emotional nourishment that relationship provided. While they may seek new sources of admiration elsewhere, those relationships rarely carry the same depth of understanding or emotional intensity. The absence of the empath's supply creates a void that cannot easily be filled. For the narcissist, this void can feel like a silent reminder that their identity was never as stable as it appeared. The emotional support they once took for granted has disappeared, and with it goes the comforting illusion that someone would always be there to sustain their sense of worth. One of the most powerful emotions shaping narcissistic behavior is shame. Not the ordinary embarrassment people feel after making a mistake, but a much deeper and more painful experience. The sense that something within them is fundamentally flawed or unworthy. This kind of shame is rarely visible on the surface. In fact, narcissistic personalities often appear confident, assertive, or even superior to others. But beneath that outward confidence lies an emotional wound that has never been safely acknowledged or processed. Deep shame often begins early in life when a child receives messages, directly or indirectly, that their authentic self is unacceptable. Perhaps their emotions were dismissed or criticized. Perhaps they were valued only when they achieved something impressive, or behaved in ways that pleased others. In some cases, the child may have grown up in an environment where love felt conditional, unpredictable, or absent altogether. Over time, these experiences shape a painful internal belief: if people truly see who I am, they will reject me. To protect themselves from this unbearable feeling, the mind constructs powerful defenses. Instead of confronting the shame directly, the person builds an identity that appears strong, successful, and beyond criticism. This identity becomes a shield against the possibility of being exposed. The narcissistic personality structure develops around maintaining that shield at all costs. Control, admiration, and superiority become tools for keeping the deeper feelings of inadequacy hidden. Because of this internal structure, the narcissist does not experience shame in the same way many people do. When others feel shame, they might reflect, apologize, or seek to repair harm they caused. For the narcissist, however, shame feels so threatening that the mind immediately activates defenses to push it away. These defenses may include denial, blame shifting, anger, or emotional withdrawal. Anything that threatens to expose the hidden wound must be neutralized as quickly as possible. When a narcissist betrays a super empath, this psychological system faces an unusual challenge. The empath often begins the relationship with deep patience and understanding. They try to see beyond the narcissist's defensive behaviors and offer compassion rather than judgment. This approach can temporarily calm the narcissist's fears of rejection. Being treated with empathy creates a rare sense of safety. However, when betrayal occurs, whether through deception, manipulation, or abandonment, the emotional consequences become complex. The empath eventually recognizes the harm and withdraws from the relationship. Unlike many people who may remain entangled in the cycle of manipulation, the super empath ultimately reaches a point of clarity. They realize that empathy cannot exist alongside repeated betrayal. Their departure becomes an act of self-protection. For the narcissist, this moment triggers something extremely uncomfortable. The loss of the empath removes a protective layer that had been shielding them from their own unresolved shame. The empath was someone who had seen glimpses of the narcissist's vulnerability, yet still offered connection. When that connection disappears because of betrayal, the narcissist is left facing the possibility that their actions caused the loss of someone who truly cared. This realization carries the potential to awaken deep shame. It suggests that their behavior harmed a person who was not attacking or rejecting them, but trying to understand them. For someone who has spent years avoiding shame, this awareness can feel intolerable. Instead of allowing themselves to fully feel the regret or responsibility connected to their actions, the narcissistic defenses activate again. The mind searches for ways to escape the discomfort. The narcissist may convince themselves that the empath was too sensitive, too demanding, or somehow responsible for the breakdown of the relationship. They might rewrite the story in ways that protect their self-image. Blame may be redirected outward so the painful emotion never has to be confronted directly. Yet even with these defenses, the experience leaves a subtle mark. The empath's departure creates a situation that cannot be completely explained away. Deep inside, there may remain a quiet awareness that someone who offered genuine care walked away because of betrayal. This awareness lingers at the edge of consciousness, often resurfacing in moments of loneliness or emotional crisis. For true healing to occur, the narcissist would need to face this buried shame with honesty and vulnerability. They would need to acknowledge the wounds from their past and recognize how those wounds shaped their behavior toward others. This process requires courage because it involves dismantling the protective identity they have relied upon for so long. Unfortunately, confronting such deep shame can feel like psychological annihilation to someone who has built their entire sense of self around avoiding it. The defenses that once protected them now become barriers to growth. Rather than stepping into the discomfort of self-reflection, many narcissists continue reinforcing the same protective patterns. In this way, the shame that lies beneath the narcissistic personality remains unresolved. It stays hidden behind layers of pride, control, and emotional distance. And when the memory of betrayal surfaces, instead of becoming a doorway to healing, it becomes another feeling the narcissist struggles to outrun. True psychological healing requires something that many people underestimate: the willingness to look honestly at oneself. It involves recognizing the ways our actions have affected others, acknowledging the wounds we carry from the past, and taking responsibility for how those wounds shape our behavior. This process can be uncomfortable, even painful, but it is the foundation of genuine transformation. Without accountability and self-reflection, emotional patterns remain unchanged, repeating themselves again and again. For individuals with strong narcissistic defenses, this process becomes particularly difficult. The narcissistic personality structure is built around protecting the self from feelings of vulnerability and inadequacy. Over many years, the mind learns to avoid emotional pain by shifting blame, minimizing mistakes, or creating narratives that preserve a sense of superiority. These strategies may protect the individual from immediate discomfort, but they also prevent meaningful growth. Healing requires the opposite approach. It asks a person to pause and examine their internal world with honesty. Instead of defending every action, they must become curious about their own motivations and reactions. Instead of blaming others for every conflict, they must ask whether their own behaviors contributed to the situation. This kind of reflection demands emotional courage because it exposes aspects of the self that may feel imperfect or flawed. In the context of betrayal, accountability becomes even more essential. When someone harms another person through deception, manipulation, or neglect, healing cannot begin until the harm is acknowledged. An authentic apology is not simply a set of words designed to repair a relationship. It involves recognizing the emotional impact of one's actions and expressing genuine remorse. It also requires a commitment to change behaviors so that the harm does not continue. For a narcissistic individual, this level of responsibility can feel threatening to their carefully maintained identity. Admitting wrongdoing challenges the illusion of being superior or faultless. It forces them to confront the reality that their actions may have caused deep pain to someone who trusted them. This recognition can activate the very feelings of shame they have spent years trying to avoid. As a result, many narcissistic personalities rely on defensive strategies to escape accountability. They may minimize the betrayal, suggesting that it was not as serious as the other person believes. They may redirect attention to the faults of the person they hurt, implying that the betrayal was somehow justified. In other cases, they may attempt to charm or manipulate the situation so that the focus shifts away from their behavior entirely. While these strategies may protect their self-image in the short term, they come at a significant cost. Without accepting responsibility, the underlying emotional patterns remain untouched. The same behaviors that damaged one relationship are likely to appear in future relationships as well. The individual moves forward without truly learning from the experience, repeating cycles of connection, conflict, and eventual rupture. When a narcissist betrays a super empath, the opportunity for genuine transformation briefly appears. The empath often communicates clearly about the emotional impact of the betrayal. They may express their pain, describe the patterns they observed, and explain why they must step away from the relationship. In doing so, they provide a rare moment of clarity, a mirror reflecting the consequences of the narcissist's behavior. If the narcissist were able to pause in that moment and truly listen, the experience could become a powerful turning point. It could lead them to question the defenses they have relied upon for so long. They might begin exploring the deeper emotional wounds that shape their need for control or admiration. Through therapy, reflection, and honest self-examination, they could gradually develop a more authentic sense of self that does not depend on dominating or manipulating others. But this path requires vulnerability. It requires letting go of the illusion of perfection and accepting the reality of human imperfection. For someone who has built their identity around avoiding vulnerability, this step can feel overwhelming. The protective structures of narcissism resist the very openness that healing demands. Because of this resistance, many narcissists struggle to move toward genuine recovery after betraying someone who truly cared for them. The emotional door to transformation may open briefly, but walking through that door requires humility, patience, and sustained effort. Without those qualities, the opportunity for change quietly closes. Meanwhile, the empath who was betrayed often begins their own healing journey. They process the pain, learn to strengthen their boundaries, and gradually reclaim their emotional energy. The contrast becomes clear. One person grows through self-reflection, while the other remains trapped within defenses designed to prevent it. In the end, healing is always available to those willing to face themselves honestly. But honesty demands courage, and for someone whose entire psychological system was built to avoid vulnerability, finding that courage becomes the most difficult step of all.